A young girl is taken to a kingdom at the end of the earth that is covered in miasma and is home to monsters that used to rule and eat people. She is then given to the king as the 99th sacrifice. Anubis, the chancellor, thinks the girl is the skinniest offering they've ever been sent. He says she's not worth eating and suggests they just tear her apart. But the girl stops him by calling him a dog and saying she is worth eating. They start to fight, but the king is interested in her and tells Anubis to leave. He is left alone in the room with the girl, who calls him a king with a short temper and tells him that he will be by himself one day if he keeps acting that way. Her guards sigh and Klops tell her to say sorry to the king. The king walks over to her and calls her rude. The king says that every sacrifice that has been brought to him before has shook with fear, so he doesn't believe that the girl isn't scared of him. He tells her to beg for her life while he puts his hand on her head, but she just pokes at his paw pads and likes how soft and squishy they are. The girl says she doesn't care about being eaten because she doesn't have a family or a house. This makes the king curious, so he asks her name. She says her name is Sari. The king tells her that the sacrifice will happen on the next night of revelation when the fog lifts. He plans to keep Sari by his side until then to see how long she can keep up her bravery. Following that, the monsters are shocked to see Sari moving around the house. The officials get angry and ask Anubis if the king plans to keep a human pet in the palace. They also tell him that the late king made peace with humans 100 years ago, but humans need to send a sacrifice to show that they are not equal to monsters. While Sari looks out the window, the king grabs her and tells her she wasn't supposed to be there, so he brings her back. Sari tells him that his room is dull and suggests that he add some flowers. The king tells her that he doesn't like flowers and that the miasma keeps flowers from growing in that land. The king tells her that the other monsters in the palace will kill her if they see her, so she should do what he says. This shows Sari that the king is worried about her. The king grabs her by the neck and says he will kill her, but the girl is not scared and says she has seen worse. There is a flashback where Sari learns that her name means sacrifice. She then goes to see her parents because she knows that the next sacrifice will be from their town. They were talking about how they took her in and raised her as a sacrifice at that time. It gets so bright in the room when her parents look at her that they can see her. She still remembers how scary their eyes looked. She tells the king that his eyes are different, so she is not scared of him, and the king starts to feel sorry for her. They visit an old fortress city that was damaged in the war with humans 100 years ago. For the king to look at it, Sari sees the lower town's remains. The king tells them that it's his job to keep monsters from making trouble with people because it's uncontrolled territory. Sari sees flowers growing in the city. The king tells her that because the miasma is so thin there, it's the only place in the land where flowers can grow. She picks some flowers from the yard and puts them on the king's head, telling him he looks cute. The king takes the crown off because he thinks she is making fun of him. Sari says that the king always has a scary look on his face, so she wants to cheer him up by making him look at the flowers. But the king grabs her and tells her that a storm is coming. He tells her that the night of revelation is coming when they get back to his room. When lightning hits, Sari freaks out because she remembers how her parents looked at her. The king puts his tail over her so she won't freak out when lightning hits. Sari tells the king that he doesn't have to be tough around her because he is so nice. Their plan is to get Sari ready for the sacrifice on the night of revelation. She is excited because she gets to wear such pretty clothes. She thinks they look like wedding dresses. Anubis leads her to the altar room, where she will wait for the king to arrive, but a lizard monster surprises her and tries to overthrow the king. So he tries to attack her with his knife because he thinks killing her will help him reach his goal. But a man in a robe blocks the knife with his hand. The lizard calls the king a coward because he thinks he is working for the king. But Sari says they have a great king who stops useless killing. When the lizard strikes again, it cuts through the man's cloak and shows his face. He takes the lizard's sword away by pointing it at it, which makes the monster run away. Sari figures out that he is the king, but he shows her the exit while telling her that he is not the king because he is half human, and the night of revelation turns him into a human. The king feels bad in the dark until he turns back into a beast. He thinks he is a poor weakling who is not fit to be king, but Sari puts something over his wound and says he's not weak. Because he has so many scars on his arms, Sari knows that he didn't eat any of the sacrifices that were made in the past. We learn that he used his own blood to trick the other animals into thinking that the sacrifices were eaten during the rite. She tells him that someone weak could never do that. So she calls him strong and says she wants to feed him instead of going home. When the king hugs her, her chains break. The next day, the king tells everyone that Sari will be queen. These people are upset about this, so he tells them to stand up and puts them in their place. Sari thinks about calling him Lard, which means brave, and he agrees, saying that he's okay with that. Later, we see two officials pleading with him to change his mind because the queen should come from a royal family, but the king scares them into giving up. As Sari walks around the palace once more, Sak and Kops tell her that the king will be angry again. But Sari isn't scared of the king because she knows he is good and wants to keep everyone safe. At that very moment, the king shows up and picks her up. He takes her back to the room and tells her to wait quietly. But Sari wants to help him, so he tells her to go to the court dinner, where all the important people in the land are going to be. The king says that his officials suggested it to him because they thought it would make him change his mind about making Sari his queen. However, he tells Sari to keep her head up. When the king goes back to his room that night, he sees Sari sleeping by the window. As he carries her, she screams and says she's sorry she fell asleep while he was working. When the king looks down and sees flowers on her lap, she tells him that they are fake flowers she made to help him rest every time he goes back to his room. The king says he doesn't like flowers, but he thinks fake flowers look good on him because he's a fake who has a lot to hide. Sari believes that it doesn't matter if it's fake as long as it can touch people's hearts. She tells him that he is like the bees that land on flowers. Even though they look scary, they are gentle and hardworking. She tells Lard that he's not fake, and as she goes to sleep, she even wants to be like him. Anubis tells Sari to be quiet during the event because she is getting in the way of the king. Guests from all over the land are at their home. They have dinner, and everyone is excited to see the new queen. Anubis tells them to be quiet while the king walks in, but the guests are shocked when they see the king holding Sari and making rude comments about how she looks because they think humans are stupid. The king tells everyone to be quiet, and Sari holds her head high as Anubis tells them to enjoy the feast. Even though they are sitting on their thrones, Sari sees that the guests are staring at her. She gets up and serves one of the guests some food, which surprises everyone. After the guest tries the food and says it's delicious, the dinner starts to be enjoyed by everyone else. When Sari goes to the kitchen to help serve the food, she runs into some monsters who won't let her in because she's human. They let her in because Cyclops tells them she is the queen. A chameleon monster still thinks she is not who she says she is, even though she helps clean the tables and gets food from the kitchen. When Sari sees a strange wine that is said to be a gift from a trade city, she brings it to the king, but the chameleon monster pulls her down with his tail. She pours the wine on the king by mistake, and the chameleon tells her she did it on purpose, which she denies. The other guests look at her, but the king just licks her face and acts calm. Knowing that the chameleon's tail is what made Sari fall, he grabs it and tells it that Sari is his queen. He threatens to kill him with his claws, but Sari stops him. He tells Lard that he owes his life to the queen, so he doesn't kill him. When the dinner is over, Sari thinks back to what happened when the floor around her started to glow. When the king shows up, she grabs him, and a holy animal named Giber lifts them into the air. The king thinks that the rough air will help her feel better, so they take off from the castle. Sari is pleased because she thought the king would get rid of her because he thought she was a burden. When they land, the king calls her a fool and tells her that he won't get rid of her because she is already a part of him. He is sure that she will stop him if something like that happens again, but she is afraid that he will hurt someone like the chameleon. He tells her that being a fake king is hard on him and that he only feels free when he is with her. He even says that she can help him become a better king, which is why he wants her to stay with him. She thinks she needs to learn more about the monster kingdom of Osaro, but Sari is having a hard time understanding everything she is reading. Anubis reluctantly agrees to teach her because the king told him to, but he feels like he is wasting his time. He then goes back to his other tasks. So she doesn't stand out too much. Sari goes outside with Lanhart while dressed as a beast. She sees his strange mask, which makes her laugh because he seems too shady. She learns about how normal animals live their lives on a busy street and starts to think that they aren't that different from people. She's glad to see a bakery because there is no bread in the house, she says. When the baker's family hears this, they start to think something is wrong, but the baker assures them that the king would never dress up as someone so sketchy. The royals and aristocrats got all the rare items when the previous king was in charge. The new king doesn't care about treats or decorations, which is good for their bakery. They buy some bread in the end, and Sari gives it to Lanhart. Lanhart doesn't think it's very good. While they eat bread, she hears Bolas, a child monster, crying because he lost his mother. They help Bolas find his mother, but Sari gets dizzy as they walk. So Lanhart takes Bolas from her while she tries to figure out what's going on. Sari tells Bolas that they will find his mother when he starts to cry. When his mother finally sees him, she thanks Sari for her help. But as Bolas falls from the king's head, Sari saves her showing everyone her human face. The other monsters are rude to her just because she's human, and Bolese's mother suddenly gets angry and tells her not to touch her kid. When they start throwing rocks at her, the king sends out his aura, which blocks their view, and he and Sari vanish. When they get back to the palace, Anubis tells him that a person was seen in the city, but he doesn't pay attention to it or any of the other requests that are made of him. Sari says she's sorry for all the trouble she caused and knows she scared everyone in town. She says it's a lot like how humans react to beasts. She thinks it's because humans and beasts have been at war in the past, but she's sure that both races don't like fighting. The king tells her he's sorry for putting her in danger because he wasn't paying attention, but he did enjoy his day with her. Sari tells him not to say sorry, as she hugs him and says she had fun too, but then she passes out. A monk Anubis is talking to says that Sari's health is getting worse because of the miasma, and that it could kill her in the end. The king knows she can't stay in the country, but Sor tells him not to worry about her. She later wakes up on a bed and sees the sky. This is when she knows she is back to living with people. She is told she is in his office by a doctor who walks up to her. She finds out that she was brought in because she was poisoned by miasma. They think she must have come from the border, where the wind can carry miasma to their side. To help clean out her body of the miasma, they give her medicine made from the ambrosia plant. The office worker says that 3 days ago, someone left her unconscious in front of the clinic with more than enough money for her care and a note. While Sari sees the royal seal on it, she can't read what's written on it because it's written in beast writing. But that was enough for her to know that the king had saved her. After that, Sari helps out at the clinic, but the assistant tells her not to push herself since she hasn't fully healed yet. She starts to live happily in the town, and her helper is pleased with her work and tells her she can stay with them. Sarai considers going back to live with the king, but she knows she can't because she will stress out the king. When people in the village talk about her, they find out that she came from the town that sent a sacrifice. All of a sudden, they avoid her and talk about her behind her back. When she sees this, she thinks of how the monsters in the city treat her badly, so she runs back to the clinic. But when she gets to the clinic, she finds that it has been attacked. The doctor tells her to leave because the people in the town think she is a sacrifice who got away from the beasts and are afraid that the Beast King will destroy the town while looking for her. She goes off on her own and realizes she has nowhere to go. She starts to cry and is about to fall off the cliff. Not long after, though, the king shows up as a person and grabs her. The king tells her that he changes into a human whenever he's in the human realm, because there is no miasma there. She asks him what he's doing there in human form. Sari thought the king had left her, but he tells her that the letter says he will come back for her. He gives her a ring with a frozen ambrosia fruit on it and tells her that it will clean her as the miasma comes in, letting her stay with him. Sak and Kops are happy to see Sari again when she goes back to the house. She wants to know more about the country and meet the people who live there so she can stay with him. Lanhart thinks that the ring will help her become resistant to the miasma. He tells her that she can take it off when she is ready, but Sari doesn't want to, and she talks about what it means to give a human a ring. The king doesn't know, and Sari says they promise to always be together. A princess named Vivian is in the castle to ask the king for his hand in marriage. Sari meets her while she is walking around. We learn that Anubis set this up because Sari's presence at the dinner caused trouble, so he is looking for a new queen to make things better between them and their peers. There are more women, and they are all there for the same reason. The queen tells them that they can't face their people if the king doesn't at least accept them as concubines. That night, Sari thinks that the princesses should be given an audience. The king says it's a waste of time because he doesn't want concubines and that Anubis set this up on his own. The king tells Sari that concubines could be a threat to her power as queen, but she doesn't want to stop him. The king gets angry and tells her to go to sleep because they're done talking about it. Sari hides in her watcher's room and thinks about going back to the king. She doesn't understand why the king was so angry, because he doesn't usually lose it. At the same time, Vivian goes into the king's room and tries to convince him to let her become his mistress, while telling him that he can't make love with a human. Sari hears this and goes into the king's room. When she gets there, she finds them in a bad spot, so she says sorry and leaves. When the king gets mad, he tells Vivian to leave. Sari goes back to her watcher's room and stays the night with them. They join the queens at the table the next day, but Vivian is nowhere to be found. Amit, the reptile princess, drops her plate by chance, so Sari cleans her up and goes outside with her. While Amit is outside, she tells him that she is scared of the king, and that she is there to help reptiles who are being mistreated. In a sense, she has been sent away because she can't go back home until she wins the king's love. They then hear that the royal guard has returned, and Jaman, the captain of the guard, rushes into the house to meet the king right away. When he sees Sari, he knows she is the queen, so he kneels down in front of her and swears his allegiance to the king. We learn that Jaman used to be a commoner, but worked his way up and earned the trust of the king. Amit told him that she loved him and that Jaman once used his royal guard's scarf to cover her wound. She still has it and wants to give it back to him. He makes her heart beat fast, and Sari agrees that the king does the same thing to her. That night, Sari is about to go to a dinner when she sees Amit upset in the corner because her dress is ruined. They make fun of her, which makes Sari think they are the ones who did it. At the dinner, Amit wants to spend time with Jaman but thinks he's too far away for her, so Sari takes off her dress and gives it to her. Sari wears her usual outfit to the event, and Amit shows up wearing Sari's dress. He gives Jaman his scarf back and makes him think of her. It's too much for Sari to handle when she sees Vivian looking at her while she drinks. When she wakes up later, Vivian is there and grabs her by the neck while she tells Sari to make room for her as queen. Sari says, though, that she wouldn't have a chance even if she wasn't there. Vivian gets very angry about this and says she will kill Sari with her claws, but Amit grabs her and tells her to run. The guards take Vivian away and knock Amit down as she charges at them. The king saves them and tells her not to show herself again. The king says sorry for being rude the night before, and Anubis thinks about how all the ladies were sent home because they couldn't change the king's mind. But Amit stays behind because he was given leave by Sari to do so. The king tells Sari that the only woman he wants is her. This makes Sari understand that she loves the king after all. Jaman takes Sari to a meeting and tells her that Anubis will do anything to protect the king's throne, even if it means going against what the king wants. At the meeting, Anubis made Sari their official queen, saying that he understood how the king felt, but that Sari had to become the most successful consort in history before the people would accept her. The first requirement is to be able to control a holy beast, which is a sign of royal power. The king is mad about this because Sari doesn't have any magical powers and her life would be taken away. She might also call a demon instead, which would be even worse than death. He ends the meeting by saying that a suggestion like that doesn't need to be looked at further. When they get back to their rooms, the king tells Sari that he will keep her safe. Sari worries that she will cause trouble in the country because of her. Sari thinks about how everyone is doing their part. As she watches Jaman train the other troops, she wants to do something for the king. Tomorrow, the king sees Sari putting her blood on the deal and asks her what she's doing. Sari says it's the right thing to do and that she needs to get everyone on board to protect him. When she tries to call up a holy beast by drawing a sigil on the floor, she gets a bad feeling and her strength goes away. She falls to her knees as the sigil blows her away because she stops before finishing the spell. She tries again, but this time the spell doesn't work and she falls down. The next day, Kops tells her that she'll be in trouble if she keeps failing because humans shouldn't try to summon more than twice a day. She tries again and draws the magic circle. She fails again and the king catches her in midair and is about to take her away. But Anubis stops him by telling him that the pledge says she can't ask for help. It's not that the king is helping her, he's just giving her a break by taking her back to his area. The king knows Sari will die if she keeps going, even though she says she's fine. Since the king doesn't want to lose Sari, he calls her a fool and says he doesn't value her life. The next day, Sari tries again to call a holy beast, but before she can finish her spell, a flame comes out of the circle. Anubis thinks she has called a monster, but Sari keeps chanting even though a flame is around her. The spell works and a small animal shows up in the circle. Even though Sari is resting on the bed, the king is giving her praise for her performance. Even though they give her food, her holy beast eats it all up, leaving her nothing to eat. The holy beast says his name is Bennu and that he is the only one who can live forever and be born again. He calls himself a phoenix and says he used to be the most beautiful holy animal in the world. Anubis walks into the room and tells Bennu that he can't be a phoenix. Bennu then tries to get into a fight with Anubis. He talks in a way that they can't understand, and we learn that only the summoner can understand the holy beast. People won't accept Bennu as the queen's holy beast, according to Anubis. He says it needs to look more royal. After that, Sari dresses up as a bird and tries to teach Bennu how to fly. They aren't getting anywhere, though. So Bennu gives up. Bennu says he has already used all of his skills, and we learn that soldiers once made him work too hard during a war. He says he'll never be able to fly again, but Sari tells him not to be so negative because, even though he's not in good shape, he gave her so much faith. The next day, Sari sees Bennu trying to fly while being chased by a killer. A man named Bennu jumps off the wall of the castle. He looks like he's going to fly, but an arrow almost hits him and makes him fall. Sari jumps after him and he calls her stupid for trying to save an immortal bird. But her actions move him, and he awakens his powers and turns into a real phoenix. Tells her he will always come back if she trusts him as he flies around town, making everyone look at him as a holy animal. A guard is attacked at the castle gate by a strange man who says he needs to talk to the king of monsters. He is eventually caught and put in jail with chains. The king goes to visit him there. The man asks him if he killed Sari, but just then Sari shows up and recognizes him as Elia. Elia is glad to hear that Sari is still living, and she begs the king to forgive Elia, telling him that she will take his punishment instead. The king says Elia is his friend, and that he attacked because he didn't know how to ring the doorbell. In a flashback, we see Elia as a young man going around town. The king wants to know about Sari's link to him. He's always hurt, so Sari gives him some healing herbs. Elia tells her it's normal for him to get hurt because he's training to be a fighter, and he promises to keep her safe at all times, even from the beasts. He is freed from his chains in the present, and Anubis tells him never to return to their world. This episode ends here. If you want to see the next part, then subscribe to our channel. We will upload the next part soon.